Welcome everyone to my Sculpting 101, in which we're gonna be working on the making of the cute demon and virtual YouTuber Debidebi Debiru. The video has been divided into two parts, and in this one I focus on the planning and blockout, and the next one will be on detailing and painting. So let's get to it. Sup everyone, I'm Nemesis from Ngo85. Welcome to my channel. In this part 1, we will work on the planning to sculpt this model and how I approach the blockout process. As I consider myself a Blender rookie, like some of you, please remember that my videos are not a how to do things, but a how I do things. And with this out of the way, let's begin. As usual, I will begin by studying the model in Clip Studio Paint. The good thing for this model is that I was able to find a reference with different views. The reference was uploaded by Foxtrot Fridays, and you will find the link in the description. I know that I will be using subdivided cubes a lot. For the head, I believe that is expected. I have the arms blocking the body, so I will need to figure this one out, but I know for sure that with some sort of pear shape I can get away with it, and that is something I can see from the back view. I noticed from the side view that pretty much there is no neck, so I will just connect the head straight to the body. The arms seem to be just one part going straight down from the shoulders, as if there are no elbows, but this is something that we just know that should be hidden there somewhere. I'm also using subdivided cubes for the arms. I can see 3 fingers or claws that I can either extract from the arm mesh or just use a different mesh. Ears are also to be represented with subdivided cubes, and I can carve out the internal part of it. The model has 3 horns, and this can be done with either curves, vertices with skin modifier, or just with subdivided cubes. The good thing about this is that you always have multiple ways to do it. The fur around the neck will be a separate object, just to make things easier. The legs are normally divided into 3 parts with the thigh, leg and foot, but in this reference it seems to be just the thighs connecting to the foot, so I will get some animal reference to get this a bit more accurate. For the tail, I will extrude a vert and give a shrink wrap modifier with subdivisions, and for the heart-shaped part, this should be easily done with a plane with a solidify modifier. I will try to get my eyes early so I can see if I'm close to the likeness of the model. I will subdivide some spheres and paint them similar to the reference. These are going to be placeholders to be replaced later on. There are some references in which the model has the mouth open, and I really like those, so I'm planning to do the model like that. I will shape this model in a T position, as this makes it easier for sculpting and when we are remeshing to avoid proximity issues. The last part will be the wings. In the back reference I can see where they are connected. I will make the bones in the wing similar to the tail, and I will use a plane to represent the rest of the wing. I have my plan, so let's move to Blender. For our preparation, with Shift A, I will add a cube, and with Ctrl number 3, I subdivide it and proceed to apply the modifier from the modifier panel or by pressing Ctrl A and clicking on Visual Geometry to mesh. With Shift A, then click to Image and then Reference, I navigate to my reference that I previously got separate. I wanted to have the head with a close size compared to the sphere, but then decided not to do that to avoid having to scale all the images and accuracy issues. I do the same as before and add my side view image and move it to have the head closer to the center. Next is to add the back view, but I run into a problem of having the front face in the way. But for this, we just have to change the side to front. And just in case guys, I get this pie menu by pressing the grave accent, backtick, tilde or backquote key. This one right here. I roughly place the back view to match the front one, then start renaming with F2 and drop the opacity of the front image. Pick and rename the back view image, and using the horn as my guide, I position the images to match. After I have my references set, I select them all and press M to get the collection panel and group them together with a name. If you already watched the making of Sharky video, link in the description, you know I like to have the reference in front of the mesh in terms of visibility. Now I play with the opacity and make all the reference to have the same number. To do this quickly, just position the cursor on top of the value bar and press Ctrl C. Then navigate to your reference and placing the cursor there once again, just press Ctrl V. Because I only want to see the reference when I'm in orthographic view, I uncheck the perspective box. To avoid moving my references by mistake, I disable the selection. I can disable each image or just the whole folder. If you don't see this option, you can find it in the filter. Let's begin with our blockout. The blockout is pretty much the building of a 3D model using simple shapes. I like to take it a bit further and add some primary details because to keep myself motivated, I like to see some results good enough to establish if I'm on the right path. In Sculpt Mode and with the grab brush selected, I change the fall off shape to projected to influence the mesh based on the view and start shaping the model according to the reference. Don't forget to turn on the symmetry. I changed the matte cap to improve the visibility. You can reduce the radius of the brush with the F key. I add a new subdivided cube and move it in place pressing the G key in object mode. With my symmetry on, I start shaping. For the legs, with a subdivided cube, I add a mirror and my target is an empty object that I created at the center, name it as mirror and hide it. So every time I mirror something, I use it as a target object to keep all organized and safe from moving. To avoid having issues after scaling your object, press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Now I can apply the subdivision and start sculpting the legs. I duplicate the mesh to create the rest of the leg and scale it. From the back view and moving with G and pressing X to constrain the movement to the X-axis, I position the object. Apply the scale and move to sculpting. Same as with the legs, I subdivide a cube to represent the shoulders. The shoulders are not visible in the reference, so I'm just making this up by looking at other references and based on my visual memory. For the arms, I create my basic shape and pressing S to scale and Z to constrain to the Z axis, I stretch the mesh to be more similar to the arms in the reference in terms of a shape and length. The length in the front and side views was not matching, so I decided to continue with the front view for this. Now in Sculpt Mode, I start shaping. I am using the side view to adjust the width of the arm. Happy with the arms, I create a sphere for the ears. I duplicate the object with Shift D and put them on the side as I know that I will need this later so I can save more time. Back to Sculpt Mode to work on the ears. With most of the main shapes in place, I switch the fall-off shape of the grab brush back to sphere and start tweaking. I do this as I know that I will be now rotating the model a lot and I do not need the brush to affect the whole mesh based on the view. Keep your model at low resolution for as long as you can during this stage, as this will make it easier to control and will not impact the system's performance. Remember to look at your model from all sides. I made a very basic shape for the hooves. At this point, I'm shaping the hooves thinking where they should be rather than just following the reference because I felt they were a bit off. With Alt Q, you can switch from mesh to mesh in Sculpt Mode. Having set the length of the arms and to work without blocking the legs or other parts, I will bring the model to a T-pose. In Object Mode, I go to Options and check Origin, and from the Tool panel, I pick the Move tool. Now I can move my origin point to the top of the arm and use that point as my area of rotation. I tweak the shoulders a bit for a better connection with the rest of the arm. Now I will work on the head, but first I remesh to get more resolution with R and apply the remesh with Ctrl R. And with my madcap friend, I start shaping the nose and rest of the face and forehead. Looking from different angles, I adjust the shape of the head. With the clay strips and holding Ctrl, I start to carve the eye sockets. It's okay to move from one part to the other and not focus on just one for too long. Normally when working on one part, you will notice others that need more attention. Also remember to take breaks so you can see the model with fresh eyes. Now it's time to remesh the ears and do some adjustments. Looking from a different angle, I can sculpt the ear into a more pointy shape. To carve the internal portion of the ear, with M I get the mask brush and mask the area under the ear. Then with Ctrl I invert the mask, and while holding Ctrl with the clay strips, I remove some of the mesh. To push in a more even way, I use the draw brush while holding Ctrl. We were all waiting to start using those floating spheres. I duplicate them with Shift D and place them on the head to begin sculpting the horns. Using the reference, I can place them in the right position. At this point, I was not trusting the accuracy of the reference, so I started placing the horns based on what I think was right. If you already watched my Starting Simple video, remember not to put pressure on yourself. Have fun. I'm not being paid to follow the model exactly as it is. I will respect the reference and the artist who made it, but would not stress myself, and you should not either. The rest of the process here is similar to what I did with other parts of the body. Using the same technique, I modeled the second pair of horns. Again, I make it more pointy from the bottom. More repetitive work while working on the third pair of horns. Moving to the body, I increase the resolution by remeshing and smoothing the surface holding the Shift key. I reduce the size of the head since the rest of it should be for the fur. I move the position of the ears with G and constrain the movement to the Y-axis, as I felt the placement of the ears to be slightly off. Now it's time to work on the tail. With Shift A, I add a single vert. If you don't have this, go to Edit, Preferences, Addons, and in the search bar type Extra and check the Extra object box. With my vertex created, go to Edit and Vertex Mode. You can press the number 1 for this. And to make it visible, press Alt-Z for the X-ray mode. With E, I begin to extrude following the shape of the tail. Now I add a skin modifier to give volume to the vertices and create a subdivision modifier and duplicate it. One is for smoothing the curvature and the other one is to smooth the shape. I change the matte cap as I do not need it anymore. To shrink the size of the mesh, select all the vertices and press Ctrl A. Now I can start positioning the vertices to match the reference. To add more vertices, select 2 of them and do right click and click on Subdivide. This way I can tweak the mesh further. With the same technique used for the tail, I start making the wings. I was having some issues and decided to reapply the modifiers, but then I realized that the problem was that I did not have a root. So if you have this issue, just select one of the vertices and mark it as the root. With Ctrl A, I shrink and start subdividing to have more verts and more control over the shape. I extrude the last vert to connect it to the back. Add a mirror modifier using my empty as the target as usual. Then I take the last vert and with Ctrl A, I make it more pointy. I keep rotating the model and correcting from all sides. For the claws, I subdivided the cube and with S I scale and with G I move it closer to the hands for proportions. Then with Ctrl A I apply the scale to prevent having any issues later. Pressing Tab I go to Edit Mode. In case you are wondering what is the add-on I use when pressing Tab, this is Machine Tools. It's the free version that you can find in Blender Market, link in the description. Now in Edit Mode with Ctrl R, I add a loop and drag so I can flat the part of the claw that will be connected to the paw. With Alt Z, I go to X-ray mode and switch to vertex mode so I can easily select the whole front of the mesh. And with G, X, I move it along the X-axis. Then with S, Z, I can scale on the Z-axis. I create a new loop to start giving a curved form to the object. Having the front vert selected, I scale in the Y-axis to give that claw-like appearance. I place the claw and adjust it from different angles. Now I can apply the modifier and in Sculpt Mode start tweaking the shape of the object. In Object Mode with Shift D, I duplicate the object for the second claw and start moving into position. With R, I can rotate the object. I create the third claw with the same approach. I mirror the claws, but this time to make it quicker, I select them and then I select the arm so I can copy the mirror from it. To do this, in Edit, Preferences, Addons, search for Copy Attributes menu and check the box. You can access the tool by pressing Ctrl C. With the arm selected, I go to Sculpt Mode and remesh it. Then with the Draw Sharp brush, I start creasing in between the claws. At this point, it is just as a reference, as I will make it more noticeable during the detail phase of the sculpting. I give more resolution to the arm so I can mark the area with the Draw Sharp a bit better. With the Clay Strips brush, I start to add the pads of the paws and some volume on top of the claws. It is time to adjust the legs. At this point, I'm relying on what I think is right rather than what I have in the reference. Remember that switching from one mesh to the other, it's like resetting yourself and will make you see things that you might have missed. With the clay strips, I start adding a bit of mesh to where the wing sockets are supposed to be. Eyes are so important for the likeness of the characters, so now as a placeholder I'm using a sphere to represent them. Then I add a mirror modifier. As I will paint them, I subdivide the eyes for more resolution. In Sculpt Mode, I give more resolution to the head, and with the clay strips and draw brush, I carve more of the eye sockets. Then I keep tweaking with a grab brush. I have a second monitor with a reference, so this part is just me trying to make it look as close as possible to the reference so I can get that likeness. Look at your model from all the angles. For the mouth, with M, I get the mask brush and increase the strength to begin masking the mouth area. While holding Ctrl, I can refine the edges by removing parts of the mask. I do the same to represent those small fangs I see in the reference. Now with the mask inverted with Ctrl I, I take the draw brush while holding Ctrl and start carving the mouth. To be able to detail the mouth a bit more, I remesh it. I make the eyes bigger and scale them along the Z-axis to stretch them to resemble to the eye shape in the reference. Now it's time to paint the eyes. If you want to know more about how to paint in Sculpt Mode, you may want to watch this video. These are placeholders that I'm planning to replace with the Tiny Eyes library. On this part, I did also a placeholder for the fur around the neck just to have an idea. I think now it's time to work on the feet or hooves. I want the model to have the bottom of the hooves flat. For this, I'm using the line project. Depending from which direction you are dragging, the cut will be made, but you can also change the direction by holding the tool in place and pressing F. From here, I do the usual move with the grab brush and smooth while holding Shift. Slowly it's starting to look like our guy. I work on the head and start to add more mesh around the horns to represent the connection. This is a type of detail that you cannot see in the reference, but you know that should be there. Now I can refine the horns. I use the scrape brush to flatten the inner part and give it a stylized look. With the crease brush and holding Ctrl, I can sharpen the transitions between the flat areas and the rest of the horn. Pulling some of the mesh with the grab brush, I can represent the clump of fur that is coming out of the face. As I would like them to be more pointy, I change my fall off to sharp. Moving to the second horn, I repeat the same process as for the first one. For the nose, with the mask brush, I mark the area, then invert it, and with the inflate brush, I start to make the nose. Looking good. Now I remesh the body and work the back with a clay strip brush, making the connection for the wings, legs and tail more obvious. I feel that the tail is a bit thick, so in edit mode, with all the birds selected, I shrink them with Ctrl A. The time has come to fill those wings. With Shift A, I create a plane, and rotate with R along the X-axis 90 degrees. In edit mode and with the G key, I start to move the vertices to match the reference. I subdivide to have more verts and be able to shape the wings. To add thickness, I use a solidify modifier. In edit mode, I connect some of the vertices by selecting 2 at a time and pressing the J key to join. I will use this to curve the wing later on. I subdivide to add a vert in the middle. To round the corners a little, I select them and press Shift-Ctrl B to bevel the vertex. By scrolling the mouse wheel, I can add an extra vertex. To smooth the wing, I add a subdivision modifier, then apply the modifier. Back in edit mode, I can use the vertex I created in the middle and the ones around it. I select them with the paint selection by pressing C, and when I'm done, I do a right click to confirm. With the proportional editing active, I press G and scroll to make bigger the area of influence, and I start to give the wing that characteristic curvature. I move the wing into position and add a mirror modifier. Now in Sculpt mode, I can correct the wings. As I'm pushing the edges, I'm not losing the curvature previously created. For the missing bones in the wings, it's the same process I did before. Let's stick the wings to the bones with a grab brush. I give some resolution to the wings and smooth them. With the inflate brush, I'm adding a bit of thickness to the edge of the wing. Mirror the rest of the bones. Then I subdivide them and apply the modifier to tweak them in Sculpt mode. For the rest of the bones around the wings, I apply the modifiers. In this case, I wanted to keep the mirror, so in edit mode, I hover over the verts on the left side and press L to select them all, then X and delete vertices. Now in object mode, I can add the mirror. The rest is the same as before. Duplicating one of the claws with Shift D, I can add the nail that is placed on top of the wing. That will be the thumb according to the bat anatomy. I position the nail with a grab brush. To reduce this part, I smooth until it's hidden. From the back view, I press Alt Z for the X-ray mode, and with a draw brush, I mark the bones from the back part of the wing. Now that it's visible, I can take the draw sharp and sharpen with Ctrl. With the cylinder, I replace the neck part as I'm planning to use some VDMs on this one. A good practice when saving is to save your stages. For instance, I have the model saved with all separate parts, and now I can have one with all the parts joined together. For saving management, I use the free add-on Power Save. I review the model and do some minor adjustments before combining the objects. I make sure to leave enough space in between the claws to avoid any issues when combining and remeshing the objects. I select all the parts of the model, leaving the body for last to make it the origin. Then with Ctrl A, I click on Visual Geometry to Mesh to apply all the modifiers and the scale. Then with Ctrl J, I join the parts together. In Sculpt Mode, I give it a good resolution with R and apply it with Ctrl R. At this point, I make sure that all the parts were properly remeshed. And that's it guys for this first part of the video. In the next one, we will add the final details to the model. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to leave your comments and suggestions to improve the channel. Thank you for watching and see you soon.